Little black girl points at Judge and says, "You're my dad." The courtroom falls silent. The courtroom was unusually quiet, a kind of silence that seemed to stretch, making every shuffle of paper and every breath audible. 6-year-old Amara Daniels sat on the edge of her chair, her small legs swinging under the table. Dressed in a sunny yellow dress and clutching a worn stuffed bunny, her wide, curious eyes scanned the room. This was no ordinary custody case, and everyone in Lexington, Kentucky, knew it. On one side sat Vanessa Daniels, Amara's mother, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the plaintiff's table. Across from her, the state attorney, arguing that foster care was the child's best option. At the center of it all was Judge William Harper, a man known for his composed demeanor and unshakable commitment to the law. But today, something about this case gnawed at him. As Amara was called to speak, the room collectively held its breath. "Amara, do you know why you're here today?" Harper asked, his voice steady but kind. Amara nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm here because people don't know where I belong." The judge's sharp blue eyes softened. "And where do you think you belong?" With a confidence beyond her years, Amara pointed at him and said, "With my dad." The courtroom froze. Judge Harper's breath caught in his chest as Amara added, "You're my dad." Judge William Harper sat on the bench, the weight of his decades-long career pressing heavily on his shoulders. At 58, he had seen it all: murder trials, bitter divorces, corporate lawsuits, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Known as a paragon of fairness and composure, Harper was the kind of judge who commanded respect without ever raising his voice. His silver hair was always neatly combed, his tailored robes always pressed, and his piercing blue eyes conveyed both authority and wisdom. Yet beneath his stoic exterior, he harbored regrets about choices he'd made as a young man, paths untaken, and relationships left unresolved. He had built his life around the law, but at a cost he rarely allowed himself to confront. Across the room sat Vanessa Daniels, a woman whose life had not followed such a straight and steady course. At 34, Vanessa bore the marks of a hard life, deep lines etched into her face from years of struggle and worry. Once vibrant and full of promise, she had fallen on hard times after Amara's birth, grappling with financial instability and the stigma of being a single mother. Her mistakes had been laid bare in the courtroom, amplified by the state's attorney, who portrayed her as unfit. But Vanessa's resilience shone through her trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. She had made mistakes, yes, but she had also fought tirelessly to provide a semblance of normalcy for her daughter. Amara was her everything, the light that kept her going even in the darkest of times. And then there was Amara herself. At just 6 years old, she had already captured the attention of everyone in the courtroom. Petite with dark, curly hair that framed her face, Amara was no ordinary child. There was an uncanny maturity in her big brown eyes, a quiet wisdom that made even the most hardened adults pause and take notice. Her voice, clear and steady, carried an authority that belied her age. Though clutching a stuffed bunny for comfort, she radiated a confidence that filled the room. Amara's life had been marked by uncertainty, moving from one place to another, always feeling out of place, but her love for her mother and her quiet longing for stability were unmistakable. As the case unfolded, these three lives collided in ways none of them could have predicted. Harper's carefully constructed world began to crack under the weight of Amara's innocent yet devastating claim. Vanessa's fight for her daughter's future became more than a legal battle. It was a chance to reclaim her dignity. And for Amara, this courtroom wasn't just a place to decide her custody. It was the stage where she would challenge the adults around her to confront their pasts and choose her future. The soft click of the courtroom's gavel broke the heavy silence. Judge William Harper's voice, steady but tinged with an almost imperceptible tension, announced the continuation of proceedings. The courtroom had been simmering with unease since the moment Amara Daniels had declared him her father. The words hung in the air, reshaping the dynamics of a case that had seemed straightforward just moments before. Vanessa Daniels sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid, her hands gripping the edge as if bracing against the storm. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Vanessa barely seemed to hear. Her gaze flickered between Amara and Judge Harper, as though searching for the right reaction in an increasingly surreal moment. On the opposite side, the state's attorney furrowed their brow, scribbling furiously on a legal pad, recalibrating their approach in real time. Amara, the smallest and youngest person in the room, was also its most significant presence. She sat quietly now, clutching her stuffed bunny, her wide eyes studying the faces of adults whose world she had upended. "Ms. Daniels," Harper began, his voice betraying a crack despite his attempt at composure. "The court needs clarity on your daughter's statement. Is there any truth to what she has claimed?" The room felt even stiller as Vanessa hesitated. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and then took a deep breath. "Your Honor, She started, but her voice faltered. Her lawyer interjected, asking for a brief recess, but Harper shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "This question needs an answer. Now." Vanessa's lips trembled. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she finally managed. "Yes. It's true." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Harper's jaw tightened, and his hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. For a moment, he seemed to forget that he was presiding over this case, and not merely a participant in the unfolding drama. "Why was this never brought to my attention?" Harper asked, his tone sharper now, breaking through the initial shock. Vanessa's voice was barely audible. "I didn't think you'd want to know. Back then, you were so focused on your career, your life. I thought I was doing the right thing by not complicating things for you." The state's attorney seized the opportunity to regain control of the narrative. "Your Honor, regardless of the personal revelations made here today, the focus remains on what is best for the child. Ms. Daniels has a documented history of instability, which this court must take into serious consideration." Vanessa's lawyer countered, her voice rising with determination. "And yet, Ms. Daniels has worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter despite immense hardship. These revelations only strengthen her case. Amara deserves to stay with her mother." The debate swirled around Amara, who seemed unfazed by the cacophony of voices and legal jargon. She looked at Harper with an expression that was both innocent and knowing, as if she understood the turmoil her words had caused but remained steadfast in her belief. Harper raised a hand, calling for order. The attorney's voices fell silent, and the focus returned to him. He took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Daniels, I will require verification of your claim. This court will order a DNA test to determine the facts. Until then, Amara will remain in her mother's custody, but with oversight from Child Services to ensure her well-being." Vanessa nodded, her relief tempered by the lingering tension. The state's attorney's expression hardened but remained professional. Harper's face, however, was a mask of carefully controlled emotion. Inside, his thoughts raced. Could it be true? Could the child sitting before him really be his daughter? Memories he had long buried began to surface. Late nights with Vanessa years ago, moments of passion and connection that had seemed fleeting at the time but now took on a weight he hadn't anticipated. As the courtroom adjourned for the day, Harper retreated to his chambers. He closed the door behind him and sank into his chair, running a hand over his face. The reality of the situation hit him like a tidal wave. For years he had prided himself on separating his personal life from his professional duties. Now, the two worlds collided in the most unimaginable way. Meanwhile, Vanessa left the courthouse with Amara. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement, their cameras flashing. Vanessa shielded her daughter as best she could, muttering, "No comment," while ushering Amara into the back seat of a waiting car. Once inside, she pulled Amara close and whispered, "Everything's going to be okay, baby." Amara looked up at her mother and asked softly, "Is he really my dad?" Vanessa's breath hitched, but she nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. He is." That night, Harper sat alone in his study, staring at an old photo album. He hadn't thought about Vanessa in years, but now her face was all he could see. The what-ifs that had once seemed pointless to consider now loomed large. Could he have been a father all these years without knowing? Could he even begin to make amends for the lost time? The following morning, the results of the DNA test were expedited due to the unusual nature of the case. Harper sat in his chambers when the envelope was delivered. He stared at it for a long moment before finally tearing it open. His eyes scanned the page, and the confirmation hit him like a blow to the chest. Amara Daniels was, without a doubt, his biological daughter. The revelation changed everything. Harper knew the days ahead would be filled with legal battles and personal reckonings. The custody case was no longer just about Amara's future. It was about his own, and whether he could rise to the challenge of being the father she deserved. The days that followed Amara's revelation and the DNA confirmation were a whirlwind of legal maneuvers and emotional upheaval. Judge William Harper, now thrust into a deeply personal role within the very system he had served impartially for decades, found himself struggling to reconcile his new identity as Amara's father with his duty as a judge. The case had to be reassigned to another judge, Leonard Shaw, a senior colleague who accepted the unprecedented circumstances with a raised brow but little comment. The courtroom proceedings continued, but for Harper, the real battle was unfolding outside its walls. Vanessa Daniels felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The state's attorney intensified their case, now armed with the argument that her deception, intentional or not, about Amara's paternity raised serious questions about her fitness as a parent. Vanessa's lawyer countered with the narrative of a mother who had done her best in impossible circumstances, but the courtroom's lens was unforgiving. Vanessa's financial struggles, her run-ins with the law years prior, and the precarious nature of her current living situation were all magnified under scrutiny. The stakes had never been higher, and Vanessa's fragile composure began to crack. Amara, meanwhile, remained the calm eye of the storm. She seemed to sense the gravity of the situation but carried herself with a quiet dignity that unnerved the adults around her. She watched as her mother cried behind closed doors and as Judge Harper grew increasingly distracted in her presence. Amara wasn't angry or confused. Instead, she radiated an odd serenity, as though she understood what was happening on a level deeper than words. For Harper, the conflict escalated in both public and private spheres. The revelation of his paternity became a small-town scandal. Headlines splashed across local newspapers and social media, dissecting every facet of the case. Judge Harper's secret daughter became a talking point in coffee shops and community centers. Some sympathized with him, viewing him as a man blindsided by a past he had no control over. Others questioned how he could have remained oblivious, painting him as negligent or, worse, uncaring. The media attention compounded Harper's internal struggles. Late at night, alone in his study, he found himself grappling with memories of his brief relationship with Vanessa. He remembered their fiery debates, her infectious laugh, and the ways she had challenged him to see the world differently. But he also remembered how their paths diverged so sharply, his relentless pursuit of his career and her quiet retreat from his life. Had he truly been so blind to the possibility of a child? Or had he simply chosen not to see? Harper's personal reckoning was interrupted by the practical demands of fatherhood, a role he had never expected to play. Amara's court-appointed guardians suggested supervised visits to allow Harper and Amara to begin building a relationship. The first meeting took place in a small room at the courthouse, devoid of the usual judicial trappings. Harper felt out of place, his tailored suit too formal for the occasion. Amara sat across from him, her stuffed bunny perched on her lap. "Hi, Amara," Harper said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Hi," she replied, her tone neutral but curious. An awkward silence stretched between them. Harper struggled to find the right words. He had spent decades commanding courtrooms with ease, but here, with his daughter, he felt powerless. Finally, he asked, "What do you like to do for fun?" Amara shrugged. "I like to draw. And read." "What do you like to read?" "Stories about adventures," she said simply. Harper smiled faintly. "Adventures, huh? I think we could use a little adventure right now." Amara giggled softly, a sound that warmed Harper in a way he hadn't expected. The tension began to ease, and for the first time, Harper felt a glimmer of hope that he could find his footing in this uncharted territory. While Harper and Amara's bond began to take tentative shape, the courtroom battles intensified. Judge Shaw pressed both sides for solutions that prioritized Amara's well-being. The state's attorney leaned heavily on Vanessa's history, arguing that her instability posed a long-term risk to Amara. Vanessa's lawyer, however, painted a different picture, a mother who had faced insurmountable odds and emerged with an unwavering commitment to her daughter. Amara has always known love, Vanessa's lawyer argued passionately. Despite her challenges, Ms. Daniels has provided a home filled with care and support. The presence of her biological father only strengthens the network of people who love and protect this child. The opposing counsel wasn't swayed. Love is important, the state's attorney countered, but it cannot replace stability. This court must consider the environment in which Amara will thrive, not just survive. The turning point came when Amara herself was called to speak again. The court appointed her guardian to sit with her, offering reassurance as she took the stand. Judge Shaw leaned forward, his expression kind but serious. "Amara," he said gently, "I know this is a lot to ask, but can you tell us what you want? Where do you feel most safe and happy?" Amara glanced at Vanessa and then at Harper. She hesitated, clutching her bunny tightly. "I love my mommy," she said softly. "She's always been there for me. But," she paused, her voice faltering, "I think my daddy could be there for me too. I just want us to be a family." Her words sent ripples through the courtroom. Vanessa's tears flowed freely, while Harper sat frozen, his heart aching at the purity of her wish. Judge Shaw nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Amara," he said. "You've been very brave." Outside the courtroom, Harper and Vanessa found themselves face to face for the first time without attorneys or reporters buffering them. The tension was palpable, but so was the shared purpose that tethered them. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Vanessa said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to protect her." "I know," Harper replied. His voice was softer now, less the commanding judge and more the man who had loved her once. "But we're here now. And we have to figure this out, for her." Vanessa nodded. "She deserves better than all this fighting." "Then let's stop fighting," Harper said firmly. "Let's find a way to give her what she needs." In the weeks that followed, the two began working toward a compromise. They attended court-mandated parenting sessions together, awkward at first but gradually building a fragile alliance. The sessions forced them to confront their pasts and to consider what kind of future they wanted for Amara. Through it all, Amara remained the anchor. Her unwavering love for both her parents challenged them to rise above their differences. Slowly, they began to see not only what they had lost but also what they stood to gain by working together. The conflict, once overwhelming, began to shift into something resembling hope. But the road ahead was still uncertain, and the stakes remained high. For Harper, Vanessa, and Amara, the question was no longer just about custody. It was about building a family out of fractured pieces, one step at a time. The courtroom was tense as the custody battle reached its most grueling phase. Weeks of testimony, arguments, and revelations had brought everyone involved to an emotional breaking point. For Judge Leonard Shaw, the burden of determining Amara's future was heavier than any decision he had faced in his long career. He reviewed the case meticulously, weighing every word and every nuance. The stakes were not just legal but profoundly human, and they carried the weight of redemption, forgiveness, and the fragile hope of a better future. Vanessa Daniels sat at the plaintiff's table, her face pale but resolute. Her lawyer had spent the better part of the morning laying out Vanessa's progress since Amara's birth, her commitment to sobriety, her steady employment at a local diner, and her determination to create a stable home for her daughter. But the state's attorney was relentless, questioning every choice Vanessa had made, painting her as a woman still struggling to outrun her past. "Ms. Daniels," the state's attorney began during cross-examination, their tone sharp. "You claim to have changed, but how can this court be sure that your instability won't resurface? Your record shows a pattern of behavior that cannot be ignored." Vanessa's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the stand. She took a deep breath, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. I can't change the past, she admitted. But I've done everything in my power to build a better future for my daughter. I love her more than anything, and I will never stop fighting for her. In the gallery, Harper watched, his expression unreadable. He had recused himself from the case, but his presence loomed large. His own lawyer had prepared him for the challenges ahead, warning him that his sudden involvement in Amara's life would be scrutinized. Harper knew the questions would come, about his absence, his priorities, and his ability to provide a stable environment for a child he barely knew. When Harper took the stand later that day, the room seemed to hold its breath. The state's attorney wasted no time. Judge Harper, they began, their tone respectful but probing. You've spent decades upholding the law. Do you believe that stepping into your daughter's life now, after 6 years of complete absence, is truly in her best interest? Harper's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. I didn't know about Amara until recently, he said. If I had known, I would have been there. I can't change what I didn't know, but now that I do, I'm committed to being the father she deserves. The attorney pressed further. You've built a career based on logic and impartiality. How can you reconcile the emotional complexities of fatherhood with the structured life you've led? Harper paused, his gaze drifting toward Amara, who sat quietly beside her court-appointed guardian. Fatherhood isn't about perfection, he said finally. It's about being present, about learning and growing every day. I'm not perfect, but I am willing to do whatever it takes to be there for my daughter. As the questioning continued, Harper's composure cracked just slightly, enough for the room to see the depth of his emotions. For the first time, the court saw not just a judge but a man grappling with his own shortcomings and desperate to make things right. Meanwhile, Amara's voice remained the clearest and most poignant of all. When called to the stand again, she spoke with a simplicity that cut through the noise. I love my mommy, she said, her small voice filling the courtroom. She's always taken care of me. But I love my daddy too. I just met him, but I know he cares about me. I want us to be together. I want a family. Her words lingered in the air, drawing tears from Vanessa and a visible tightening of Harper's throat. Even Judge Shaw's stoic demeanor softened as he thanked Amara for her bravery. The crisis reached its peak when a surprise witness was called to testify, Harper's estranged sister, Caroline. She had flown in from out of state after learning about the case and requested to speak. Harper's expression shifted to one of shock as she took the stand. Caroline Harper, she introduced herself. I'm William's older sister. We haven't spoken in years, but I've come today because this case is about more than custody. It's about my brother facing the man he's become. Her testimony was both a critique and a plea. Caroline spoke of Harper's single-minded focus on his career, how it had isolated him from family, and how it had blinded him to the relationships that mattered most. William is a good man, she said, her voice firm but emotional. But he spent so much of his life trying to be the perfect judge that he forgot how to be a brother, a son, and now a father. This is his chance to change that. Her words hit Harper like a hammer, forcing him to confront truths he had long buried. The courtroom was silent as she stepped down, the impact of her testimony rippling through everyone present. Judge Shaw adjourned for the day, giving all parties time to process. That evening, Harper sought out Vanessa outside the courthouse. She was leaning against her car, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Vanessa, he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. I know I've failed in ways I can't fix. But I want to try. Not just for Amara, but for us, to figure out how to move forward. Vanessa's eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't look away. I don't know if I can trust you, she said honestly. But I know Amara deserves to have both of us. I'm willing to try, for her. The two stood in silence, a tentative truce forming between them. They both knew the road ahead would be far from easy, but for the first time, they were united in their love for Amara and their shared commitment to her future. The next day, the courtroom reconvened. Judge Shaw's expression was grave as he prepared to deliver his decision. The testimony had revealed not just the complexities of the case but the depths of human resilience and the possibility of redemption. This court recognizes the unique challenges presented by this case. Shaw began, his deep voice filling the room. It is clear that both Ms. Daniels and Judge Harper have made mistakes. But it is equally clear that both are committed to Amara's well-being. The question is not who is more deserving, but what arrangement serves the best interests of the child. Shaw's ruling was deliberate and balanced. Vanessa would retain primary custody, with structured visitation for Harper. Both parents were required to attend co-parenting counseling and provide regular updates to the court. The decision was met with a mixture of relief and apprehension, but it was a step toward the future Amara had wished for. As the courtroom emptied, Harper and Vanessa exchanged a glance. There was no need for words. They had a long road ahead, but for the first time, they were walking it together. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation as the final hearing approached. The stakes, already monumental, now loomed like an unspoken challenge over everyone involved. This was the day when all arguments, testimony, and evidence would culminate in a decision that would shape the future of 6-year-old Amara Daniels. The tension in the air was palpable, and even the seasoned court staff moved with hushed precision, aware of the gravity of the moment. Vanessa Daniels arrived early, her lawyer walking beside her with a stack of neatly arranged documents. Dressed in a modest navy dress, Vanessa's face betrayed her sleepless nights. She clutched a small notebook in her hand, a collection of letters and drawings Amara had made for her over the years. They were her talisman, a reminder of why she was here and what she was fighting for. She knew the state's attorney would press hard, emphasizing every past mistake, but she also knew she had changed. The question was whether the court would believe her. Judge William Harper arrived separately, his suit impeccable but his face etched with fatigue. The sessions with Amara had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose and responsibility he hadn't felt in years. But they had also filled him with doubt. Was he truly ready to step into the role of a father, especially after so much time had passed? His lawyer had advised him to focus on the future, not the past, but Harper couldn't help but feel the weight of all he hadn't done for his daughter. Amara herself arrived last, holding the hand of her court-appointed guardian. She wore a light pink dress, her hair carefully braided, and carried her ever-present stuffed bunny. Despite the seriousness of the day, she looked calm, even hopeful. To her, the grown-ups' arguments and legal strategies were a distant hum. All she wanted was what she had said so plainly before, to be with both her parents. As the hearing began, Judge Leonard Shaw took his seat, his demeanor solemn. The room fell silent, save for the rustling of papers and the occasional scrape of a chair. Shaw had presided over countless cases in his career, but this one stood out for its emotional complexity. He glanced at Amara, seated quietly beside her guardian, and then at the adults whose lives revolved around her. This wasn't just about the law. It was about a child's future. The state's attorney was the first to speak. They rose confidently, their voice steady as they outlined their case. Your Honor, while we acknowledge the efforts Ms. Daniels has made to improve her circumstances, we must prioritize the stability and safety of the child. Ms. Daniels' history of financial and personal instability cannot be overlooked. Placing Amara in an environment with structured foster care offers her the best chance for a secure and prosperous future. The words stung, but Vanessa kept her composure. She knew this was coming and had prepared herself for the onslaught. Her lawyer stood next, delivering a powerful counterargument. Your Honor, Ms. Daniels has faced extraordinary challenges, but she has met them with extraordinary resolve. She has maintained steady employment, created a stable home, and most importantly, she has provided Amara with unconditional love. Foster care cannot replace a mother's love and dedication. The back and forth between the attorneys intensified. The state's attorney leaned on cold facts and statistics, while Vanessa's lawyer appealed to the human element, invoking the bond between mother and child. But the most anticipated moment came when Harper was called to speak. Though he was no longer presiding over the case, his testimony carried immense weight. As he took the stand, the room seemed to hold its breath. Harper's normally steady hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the room, his gaze lingering on Amara. "Your Honor," he began, his voice measured but heavy with emotion. "I spent my entire career believing that the law was the best way to bring order to the chaos of life. But this case has shown me that sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes it's about what's right for a person, not just what's legal." Harper paused, his voice catching. I didn't know about Amara. If I had, I would have been there. That's my failing, and it's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. But I know now, and I'm here. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to be part of her life, to make up for the time I've lost." The courtroom was silent as Harper continued. "This isn't just about me or Vanessa. It's about Amara. She deserves stability, love, and the chance to know both her parents. I'm asking this court to consider what's best for her, not just in the short term but for the rest of her life." When Harper stepped down, his words hung in the air. Even the state's attorney seemed momentarily subdued, their usual sharpness tempered by the raw sincerity of his testimony. As the hearing neared its conclusion, Judge Shaw called for a brief recess. The courtroom emptied into the hallway, where tensions ran high. Vanessa approached Harper cautiously. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "For what you said in there." Harper nodded. "We both want what's best for her. That's all that matters." Vanessa hesitated, then added, "I don't know what's going to happen, but I think Amara would want us to figure this out together, no matter what." For the first time, Harper saw not an adversary but an ally. "I think so too," he said. When the court reconvened, the final arguments were delivered with the full force of emotion and logic. The room was charged with anticipation, every word weighed heavily by those listening. Judge Shaw closed his notebook and leaned forward, signaling that the decision was imminent. The room stilled, everyone waiting for the verdict that would determine not just custody but the shape of a family. Shaw's voice, steady and deliberate, broke the silence. "This court has reviewed all testimony, evidence, and arguments presented. The decision reached today will reflect what is in the best interest of Amara Daniels." The air seemed to thicken as Shaw prepared to deliver his judgment. Harper and Vanessa exchanged a glance, united in their hope for the same thing, a future where Amara could thrive. The courtroom was silent as Judge Shaw prepared to deliver his ruling. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on everyone present, and even the air seemed thick with anticipation. Amara sat quietly beside her court-appointed guardian, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly to her chest. Vanessa's hands were clasped together, her knuckles white, while Harper's usually composed demeanor betrayed the slightest twitch in his jaw. All eyes were on Shaw as he began to speak. "This case has been one of the most complex and emotionally charged I have ever presided over," Shaw said, his deep voice resonating through the room. "It is clear that both Ms. Daniels and Judge Harper have a deep love for Amara. However, love alone cannot resolve the intricacies of this case. My decision is based on what I believe to be in the best interest of the child, both now and in the future." The tension in the room was almost unbearable as Shaw continued. "Ms. Daniels, you have shown remarkable resilience and a genuine commitment to turning your life around. Your love for Amara is evident, and your efforts to provide a stable and nurturing environment are commendable." Vanessa's breath hitched, her eyes brimming with unshed tears as she clung to every word. "Judge Harper," Shaw said, turning his gaze to him, "you have stepped forward with honesty and a willingness to take responsibility for your past absence. Your dedication to building a relationship with Amara is admirable, and your actions demonstrate a genuine desire to be the father she deserves." Harper nodded slightly, his expression resolute. Shaw took a deep breath, glancing briefly at Amara before delivering his verdict. "It is the ruling of this court that primary custody of Amara Daniels will remain with her mother, Vanessa Daniels. However, the court also recognizes the importance of Amara having a relationship with her biological father. Therefore, Judge Harper is granted joint custody, with structured visitation and shared responsibilities." A collective exhale swept through the room. Vanessa let out a small, shaky sob, her hands flying to her mouth as relief and gratitude overwhelmed her. Harper's head dipped slightly, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the verdict. It wasn't everything he had hoped for, but it was a beginning, a chance to be in Amara's life. Shaw's voice cut through the emotions swirling in the courtroom. This decision is not an end but a beginning. Both parents are expected to attend co-parenting counseling and provide consistent updates to the court. Amara's well-being depends on your ability to work together as a team, setting aside past grievances for the sake of her future. The room was dismissed, but no one moved immediately. Vanessa turned to Harper, their eyes meeting across the courtroom. For the first time, there was no animosity, only a shared understanding of the responsibility they now carried together. Outside the courthouse, Amara stood between her parents, her small hand clutching Vanessa's while her other hand hesitated before reaching for Harper's. He took it gently, his large hand enveloping hers. She looked up at them both, her eyes shining with quiet joy. "Does this mean we're a family now?" she asked softly. Vanessa crouched to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, baby. We're going to figure this out together." Harper knelt beside them, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "That's right. No matter what, we'll always be here for you." Amara smiled, her grip tightening on both of their hands. For the first time, she felt the warmth of having her parents beside her, not perfect, but together. It wasn't the fairy tale she had imagined, but it was real. And it was enough. The days following the court's decision were a mixture of adjustment, healing, and tentative new beginnings. Vanessa Daniels returned home with Amara, her heart lighter but her mind still preoccupied with the challenges ahead. The custody arrangement, though daunting, was an opportunity to rebuild her life on a stronger foundation. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of stability and hope. Amara, as intuitive as ever, seemed to sense this shift. She clung to her mother with the fierce affection of a child who had weathered uncertainty, but now saw a brighter horizon. Judge William Harper began his transition into fatherhood with equal parts determination and trepidation. He attended the court-mandated co-parenting sessions alongside Vanessa, the sessions serving as a rare space where they could communicate openly without the weight of the courtroom's formality. Harper's learning curve was steep, but he approached it with the same diligence he'd applied to his career. Slowly, he began to piece together what it meant to be a father, not just in title, but in presence and action. One Saturday, during one of his first visits with Amara, Harper found himself sitting on the floor of his living room with a pile of coloring books and crayons spread out between them. Amara talked about her favorite stories and her dreams for the future with the easy confidence of a child who felt safe. Harper listened intently, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and regret for the years he had missed. Yet he was grateful for the chance to start again, to be the father she deserved. For Vanessa, the co-parenting arrangement became a lesson in trust and compromise. She had spent years shielding Amara from the pain of her own struggles, and letting someone else share in the responsibility was an act of vulnerability she hadn't expected. But with each session, each exchange, she began to see Harper's genuine efforts. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was enough for now. Amara thrived in this new chapter. Her world, once marked by uncertainty, now expanded to include moments she had only dreamed of, drawing with her dad, cooking with her mom, and feeling the shared love of both parents who, though imperfect, were united in their devotion to her. At school, she spoke proudly of her family, her eyes lighting up as she described how her daddy helped her with her reading and how her mommy always made her favorite meals. Months turned into a year, and the arrangement grew more natural. Harper and Vanessa still had their differences, but they had learned to navigate them for Amara's sake. The shared custody had its challenges, but it also brought moments of unexpected connection. Harper would often drop Amara off at Vanessa's house, and the brief exchanges at the door became opportunities for updates, laughter, and even the occasional shared smile. One evening, as Amara sat between her parents on Vanessa's couch, the three of them looked through an old photo album Vanessa had unearthed. Amara giggled at the younger versions of her mother and father, their lives so different then, yet now forever intertwined. It was a small moment, But it was profound, a reminder that family wasn't about perfection but about showing up, even when it was hard. For Harper and Vanessa, the journey was far from over. But for Amara, it was clear, she had what she had always wanted. A family, messy and imperfect, but hers. If this story of family, redemption, and second chances moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us for more powerful tales that explore the complexities of life, love, and justice. Your support helps us keep these narratives alive. What would you have done in Vanessa or Harper's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join our growing community of story enthusiasts. We'd love to hear your perspective. Did Amara's story resonate with you? Tell us your favorite moment in the comments and share this story with your friends. Let's start a conversation about the power of forgiveness and family.